expect to be a Class 2 de novo device. The indications for use include infants as young as 30 weeks post-conceptional age through geriatrics. Given the robustness of our platform, we have several business verticals that are in development, but right now we're focused on this rapid drug test NAS monitor. So the problem we're addressing is the dramatic increase in maternal opioid use producing neonatal abstinence syndrome. Every 15 minutes, an infant is born in opioid withdrawal. That's over 32,000 infants annually at a hospital cost of greater than $563 million. And this is actually old data from 2014. Things have only gotten worse. NAS has been recognized as an epidemic as of 2012. The standard of care for opioid detection in NAS includes analyses of meconium, umbilical cord tissue, urine, and hair analyses. And while each of these have their advantages and disadvantages, none of them are universally available, and they each suffer from inadequacies in terms of sensitivity and specificity depending on the analyte. The standard of care for monitoring NAS involves a number of different scoring systems, the most common of which is this Finnegan scoring system. Here we look at a series of 21 signs in 3 broad categories. These scores are assessed every 3 to 4 hours. The problem with this is the subjectivity of these and the potential for bias of these measures. Additionally, these are signs. They're not specific to withdrawal, and therefore things like hunger, hypocalcemia, hypoglycemia, hyperthyroidism, sepsis can all be conflated with NAS. And worse yet, you have to wait either for 3 scores of 8 or greater or 2 scores of 12 or greater to be inserted into the management paradigm. That's a very long time to have an infant endure this kind of metabolic stress. So our solution is the Algometrics NAS monitor. Here we leverage our rapid drug screen platform to identify that opioids have been present and further to monitor the presence of withdrawal before overt signs of withdrawal occur. And this allows us to detect NAS, initiate appropriate therapy, monitor the treatment, and terminate the treatment when it's no longer needed. So we do this by analyzing the pupillary hippus. Hippus are the pupillary oscillations that occur in natural light. They represent or reflect the balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. You see here in the top panel the graphical display of that hippus. This is an oscillatory signal that we apply fast Fourier transforms to, and what emerges from that are frequency spectra that are unique and specific for every drug that we're able to identify, and our algorithms identify these frequency spectra. Additionally, we recognize the increase in sympathetic tone that occurs with withdrawal, and again, our algorithms recognize this, and that's long before there's any physical presence or sign of withdrawal. The competition is the standard of care, and I've already highlighted some of the shortcomings of that. Our regulatory strategy is going to leverage the fact that we were one of 8 companies out of 250 companies that won the FDA opioid challenge, and that's helping to expedite our regulatory reviews. Our reimbursement strategy depends on that initial FDA approval. We're already speaking with a specific healthcare system where we're going to integrate our technology into their healthcare system using a CPT3 code, generate data, use that data to support our application for the CPT1 code, and then engage in our revenue generating model, which includes a subscription and transactional sales model. The IP is protected by 5 patents at present, and there's more coming. If we were to win this particular competition, the money would fuel a proof of concept study done at Children's National in a cohort of infants exposed to opioids postnatally, and that data will inform enhancements to both the software and hardware platforms. Our project team for this project is a collaboration between Algometrics and Children's National. Algometrics brings the engineering, business, regulatory, and reimbursement expertise, and of course, Children's brings the clinical expertise. We have a number of ongoing collaborations. Most recently, a couple of months ago, we became a JLabs company at the JPod in Philly, and I'll take questions.
Okay, judges?
Good morning, Jim McGough of Edge One Medical. Question just on human factors, on the early trials from these, how much time does it take to capture the diagnostic information, and what's been your experience so far?
It's a 10-second scan, of which we need 7 seconds. So basically, it can be repeated if it's a failed acquisition. So if there's a blink, we just repeat the test. Is that the?
Hey, Julia. Just a practical question. The scoring is done every 3 hours, and you have to wake the baby up every 3 hours, put the device on, and...
Oh, no, we don't do the scoring every 3 hours. The scoring system for the Finnegan score is a 3 to 4 hour measure, right? That's how often you would implement that scoring system. We can do it at any time. We can do it at birth, and we can do it at any interval. If there's some concern for the possibility of NAS, the baby can be looked at. You don't have to wake them up.
So it's a one-time
It's a one-time thing, and
application.
it's done whenever, just as you would get a blood pressure or a temperature or any other biometric query. Yes.
My name is Amir from the Children's Hospital of Orange County. So your technology is dependent upon an increase in sympathetic tone, is that correct?
The recognition of withdrawal is dependent on increase in sympathetic tone. The drug identification is not.
So help me understand, would there be any difficulty or would there be any overlap in a patient who does have increased sympathetic tone for other reasons? Sepsis, sympathomimetic drugs, is there anything else that could overlap and give us a false positive with this technology? Or does that drug component really able to decipher the two causes of increased sympathetic tone in a newborn?
So it's part of the algorithm. They do have to have evidence of having had opioid activation. So it's not just any increase in sympathetic tone. So a startle reflex would do the same. So we're able to distinguish the causality.
Yeah, I guess my question, this is James Kaiser from Hoya, is kind of along the same lines. A lot of times when the patients are receiving drugs, they're not receiving just one drug, they're receiving multiple drugs. So have you guys looked at any potential confounding factors that would cause your algorithm not to recognize an overdose of opioids?
Yeah, part of the development of the larger drug identification platform is to be able to distinguish these individual drugs. And so the frequency spectra, depending on the impact, so there are activating and deactivating drugs depending on what's, and there are several baskets that we look in. Pretty much what we use clinically can be parsed out. And in this particular group, it's the maternal exposure that we're concerned about, and so most especially we're concerned about opioids. To the degree that there are confounding factors, we have to still distinguish what they are.
I'm Robin Steinhorn from Children's National. Do you see this more as a detection device to amplify what we do right now with urine and meconium testing, or do you see this as a titration of treatment device?
Well, I see it as both. So it's a biometric. Essentially, it's a biomarker that can recognize the presence of a drug and then use that as a monitoring device to look at the onset or offset of that drug, as well as detect, if it's too rapid an offset, detect that there's withdrawal occurring. And so, just as blood pressure, you can identify hypertension, and then you're going to monitor that antihypertensive. Same kind of thing.
John Parker, Spring Hood Ventures. Can you just touch a little bit more on the business model here? NAS, you mentioned, is you've got 23,000 patients. I think it's actually probably a good bit higher than that, but it's still
Quite
a
a bit higher
relatively
now.
small number. So how are you thinking about making that into a sustainable business model? You've talked about some platform things, but can you just drill down a little bit more on that?
Right. The sustainability is going to be predicated on the larger population. So this is part of our rapid drug screen platform, and it uses it serves as a presumptive drug test. So just as a urine drug test in adults would be used, we're using this to identify the presence of THC, alcohol, opioids, and that kind of thing. And so part of why I show the more expansiveness of the platform is that there is a way to fuel this smaller the business side of the smaller population. So presumptive drug testing is how it's going to be monetized.
All right, I see there was one more question down at the end. We can take that as a last question, and then we'll go on to our next presentation. If there's a mic down there. Thank you.
Hi, Kip Saranakis, Epiderics Capital. I'd just like to know what your fundraising strategy is. Do you have a sense of, and how you've been funded to date? Is it grants or angel financing, and where you're going?
Yeah, we had an initial seed round of $2.4 million and $650 in grant funding from NIH, FDA, and DoD. We're going to do one more $1.5 million seed to hopefully get us to our Series A, because we think we might be able to get a clearance prior to that time. So we're in the middle of that next seed round.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Great job. All right, so we bring up our next presenter from Astarte, I believe it's pronounced. So come on up. And I'm sure, judges, this time you guys are probably already finished or probably close to it, right? So give them a little bit of time. Jim's an old pro, done this many times. All right, great. Just give Brady one more second here. Make sure everyone's ready. All right, and just to let you know as well, there's you'll see someone down here in the front with a card as well. So if he puts up cards, he'll also be there to help you with time. All right, very good. Whenever you're ready, yeah.
Okay, good morning. I'm Tracy Warren. I'm co-founder and CEO of Astarte Medical. We're here today to talk about our data and analytics platform for use in the neonatal intensive care unit. We're a little bit different in that we're a software-only solution, and we're really focused on nutrition and gut health. So as Dr. Wessler mentioned this morning, we're surviving infants as early as 22 weeks gestation, which is great due to the advances in modern medicine, but it's creating a lot of complexity in care in trying particularly around feeding, growth, and development. So our babies, 50% under 32 weeks, experience growth failure, which means they fall off their growth curve. More than 40% have developmental delays and disability. And throughout their life, they have a greater risk of immune-mediated conditions such as allergy, asthma, and obesity. And we know that the gut, or your intestinal microbiome, is vital to your growth, how you think, how you feel throughout your lifespan. And it is your largest organ of immunity. But today, there's really no way to tell what the state of the gut is. And so for clinicians, it creates a lot of challenges. There's a lot of practice variability. Feeding, which happens every 2, 3, and 4 hours for our babies, requires substantial documentation, which has an impact on workflow. And there is no way, real time, to sort of get a sense of what that host response is to those decisions. So we've created the Microbiome and Growth Indicator. It is a platform that leverages what are known as microbial health risk factors. They're collected as part of routine care, available in the electronic medical record. We apply our proprietary algorithm that weights these different factors and creates a risk score. And with that, clinicians can then start to personalize the way they approach those babies, optimizing the way they feed them, any use of microbial interventions, pre and probiotics, and certainly can become better stewards of antibiotics. So I'll do a quick case study. This is baby Chance and baby Hope, same age and weight, which today would have the same feeding protocol. Although antibiotics would be used prophylactically in these babies, there's a lot of fits and starts, distended belly, blood in the stool, and by and large in most centers, probiotics in the US are not used. With a risk score, you can imagine very different care plans for these babies. So baby Chance, who is based on his records and factors, would have very good confidence in the use of antibiotics for this child. You'd have a much more slow and deliberate feeding plan, and you would look to introduce probiotics with the idea of attenuating any kind of inflammation. Whereas baby Hope could have perhaps at least a delay or even the withholding of antibiotics, be more aggressive in her feeding plan, and ideally support that with maybe human milk oligosaccharides or other prebiotics. So from a company perspective, we're a data company. We've built the world's largest and most comprehensive data set of preterm infant microbiome. We've married that with clinical and nutritional data for those babies and have built a suite of products around feeding and nutrition. With that also, though, we have the ability to then partner that with nutrition, microbiome, and therapeutics companies who are looking to and look to actually accelerate the introduction of new solutions for babies. We sell directly to level 3 and 4 NICUs. We have a SaaS business model, or software as a service. We really focus initially on labor and delivery hospitals with the idea of reducing length of stay, improving margins, and we even think there's an opportunity for increased revenue with some telehealth options. It's important to understand we're part of the Epic App Orchard, so from EMR integration, we've climbed a mountain, and we've partnered with groups like Redox as well to accelerate our time to market. We've just signed our first multi-year contract with a large academic medical center for utilization of the platform. That is not the gut health score. That's going to require regulatory approval, but we do have products around enteral feeding protocols. When you look at the competition for us, there are really 3 buckets because we are so comprehensive. We have sort of standard clinical decision support and AI players. There are NICU technologies around either EMR capture or in milk analysis. None of these are related to feeding and nutrition as it relates to this patient population. And certainly there are microbiome companies, whether those be in the probiotic space or in kind of the microbiome services space like Ubiome and Viome. Our management team, so we're seasoned executives. I've worked with my co-founder almost 20 years. This is our 3rd startup together. And probably as impressive, our clinical advisory board. My co-founder's here at the Brigham and Women's Hospital. Kate Gregory has a lab around preterm infant microbiome and nutrition. She's a newborn ICU nurse by training. And as you can see, we have some of the top thought leaders in neonatal nutrition and microbiome. So we are looking for the grant funding to do regulatory strategy approval. We hope to get breakthrough designation. And we have been successfully fundraised to date with a great group of investors who've supported us. Thank you.
Okay, judges. Oh.
Yeah, so this is Susan Uppert over here. You talked a lot about microbiome, but you really didn't say much about what are you doing with it? How have you developed your database, and what do you really mean? Everybody throws that term around. We need a little more specificity.
Yeah, happy to do that. So with our data set, we have actually brought in over 3,500 samples, fecal samples from about 300 infants, so very high frequency of sampling. We've done shotgun metagenomic sequencing, and we've correlated that to about 200 factors in the electronic medical record for each of those children longitudinally over their stay. So we can actually look at how decisions made in the NICU have changed that microbial community, and we're not looking for particular markers within the microbiome. We're looking at more of measures of inflammation and state of that microbiome. So it's more of a trend line, and we use that to build the data set so that when we see those factors in the medical record, we can correlate it to the data set. Does that make sense? Sort of.
So maybe along those lines, it seems like your current revenue model is what you're calling the SaaS model, which is more. Which is sort of for the protocol compliance and
Yes.
education and training. So that's somewhat of a different model than what I would consider a bit more of this AI kind of machine learning model that you're building, right? I just want to clarify that it's 2 very different.
They're actually, we consider them completely integrated. So I think what you're referring to is we have 2 products actually that our contract is around enteral feeding and protocol adherence to enteral protocols, clinical practice guidelines. That's what we're launching now and have built. But we see that as a very initial way to standardize feeding, and then you introduce the host response and the gut score as part of better titrating that and personalizing that. So it's a continuum of products. I don't think they're different, and we think that we could use that protocol platform once we get into sort of personalizing feeding strategies, using that to redeliver the information.
Hi, Tracy. Who's the decision maker for the products in the hospital, and how long do you think the sales cycle is going to be?
Sales cycle's 18 months. I always jump to that one because that's a fact. Our call point is really that usually the head of neonatology. We also get involved with the NICU director and usually the chief of nursing. Our first products really improve documentation around feeding. So we do have sort of a team that we work with, but the head of neonatology is usually our call point. We certainly have to work with the CTO or CIO on EMR integration, and then obviously value committees for approval.
Hi. So the microbiome differences exist from NICU to NICU. So have you considered will there have to be sort of a learning phase as this is adopted by any individual NICU because of those differences?
Great point. Yes. So there are environmental factors, obviously. So our vision is, and our data set was built from multiple centers that had collected. So we are able to at least start to distinguish some of that in the early data set. But I can imagine there will be sort of a training or a titration for that particular center as we do some early collections. So yes.
Just a quick question, James Lowe from Oblon. How are you updating your data set? Are you going to, as the people use it, will the data be going back into the system?
Yeah, so we take de-identified data back. It's cloud-based, so we do take all that information back. And then our vision is, and this is one of the things we need to talk to FDA, is we'd like to sample periodically at different centers to just double-check that the score is predictive and is measuring in the way we anticipate. And I think there are definitely mechanisms to do that. But yes, we'd continue to build that data set.
So what data is requisite to score each individual infant going forward? Is it just data that's entered into the EMR for that child?
To date, yes, we've been able to predict growth 5 and 7 days out with our data set with just what's collected. And some of those are maternal factors, so maternal health risk factors that you can imagine, mode of birth, diet, et cetera. But these are all things that are routinely, that was sort of a design criteria for us, that it did not have to impact workflow or require additional testing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great job. All right, so judges, finish your scoring. And we will bring up our next presenter, Brain Temp. He's already making his way up. Doesn't need my help. Great job. Very good. I'll let the judges just finish up here. Great presentation so far, right, everybody? Really good stuff. Applause for everybody. It's not easy to do these things in 5 minutes. So great job, guys. All right, let's go ahead and get started.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Dave Anderson. I'm the CEO of Brain Temp. Pleasure to be here to talk to you about what we think is the newest vital sign to help in the determination for neuromonitoring, not only in the NICU, but across a broad spectrum of indications in both the child and the adult. Non-invasive, passive brain temperature measurement and monitoring on a continuous basis will create a new vital sign that will be critical for monitoring and guiding therapy and in guiding thermo treatment of patients both across the NICU and into the adult. We believe this is the first new innovation in monitoring since pulse oximetry, and it's been quite a while since that. We've assembled quite a team to do this. We're well along our way to getting this done. We've had 2 meetings with the FDA, and we'll submit our first application to the FDA later this year. Everybody says, why brain temperature? Well, the brain is 25% of the metabolism, only 2% of the body weight. The brain temperature is different from the core body temperature. And the brain is a significant controller and may provide early warning of disease state changes in a broad spectrum of disease states. There are a number of examples in the clinical literature in the adult, mostly, that demonstrate that brain temperature taken by an invasive means is different from the core body temperature. One of my favorites is the Fountas study, where if you see brain temperature and body temperature disassociate, the results are not good. In the pediatric area, on the neonates, our area of focus is in HIE, hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, where the patients are treated routinely with 72 hours of cooling to treat their ischemic events in their brain. And they are routinely monitored by using rectal temperature. And the last time I looked, the rectum and the brain were not particularly close together. So we've made the big advancement here by moving from an invasive system, which is not possible in the neonate, to a non-invasive system that has allowed us to monitor using a patch. That's right here. This is an actual device. This is one that's been used in the clinic to monitor babies. And it just, some of us have more real estate than others, but it sticks to the head of the child. It's been